Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is episode 2 of the Mental Health and Wellbeing podcast with me, Pastor Richard Evans, and our good friend.
I have a client. I have a client that does that every time she gets on. She does this. Starts dancing. I'm like, yes, I can see you. It's awesome. Sorry, Kim Keys. Hello.
Okay. And if you haven't watched episode 0 and episode 1, I would recommend them to you. But a quick recap, we're here to answer the questions that came up from an evening that we had about mental health and a book called Spurgeon's Sorrows. And so these questions came from members and friends of our congregation as we're beginning a mental health and well-being ministry. And Kim is very qualified to answer these questions for you. And I'm very qualified to ask them and answer things that may potentially come up for me as well. So, with all that said, and hopefully this doesn't get all edited out, this
We'll see.
or this podcast, I should say, um, we're going to be talking what happens when it's more than just difficult feelings. We all
Mhm.
suffer with difficult feelings, with emotions, that kind of thing. But what happens when it's a bit more than that, when it's a bit deeper, longer, that kind of stuff. So I guess the first thing is, and this came up from one of the questions, is what is the difference between suffering and depression?
And it's a great question. And I was sitting here trying to figure out like exactly the best ways to go about answering some of these questions without getting into like the this is how we clinically diagnose things and
Mm.
those kinds of things. And I think the best way to do it is though to give people a better understanding of what mental health conditions actually are.
Okay.
One of my sort of long time, he's sort of a stalwart in our field. He's actually he's a neurologist or a neuropsychologist. I think he's a neurologist. But he splits kind of between those two worlds. Dr. Daniel Amen, if you haven't looked him up, you should look him up. He's pretty amazing. But he has this phrase he said a long time ago in a talk. I heard him speak at one point, and he said, our field is the only field that doesn't look at the organ it's treating. And
Interesting.
that took me back. It was just one of those moments where it was like a light bulb that went off in my head. And I think because of that, our field has had a history of sort of moralizing the conditions instead of recognizing them as a physical condition. So, what do I mean by that? We look at things like depression and we look at things like addiction, and oftentimes we see the behaviors that come out of that, right? We see lying or we see quote unquote laziness or lack of motivation, and we moralize that as a society in our head, right?
Mm.
When if we were able to look at the organ it's treating, and we're just now getting to a place from a technological perspective, we're just now getting to a place where we can even do that
Yeah.
because the brain is so incredibly complicated. It's I heard an analogy at one point was an analogous to space, and we know less about space, or we know less about the brain than we do about space and we do about the ocean. And we know very little about those two things.
Yeah.
So it's this huge, massive, very complex organ in the system. And so we're just now getting to where we can see it. And now that we can see some of these things, we start to see it for the issues that they are. If I have a pancreas that doesn't produce insulin to break down sugar, then I have diabetes. That's what diabetes is,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
In the same way, that's happening for somebody with diabetes. For somebody with, let's say, a major depressive disorder, their brain is not doing what it's supposed to be doing with serotonin and dopamine. That's it. It's
Yeah.
it's an organic issue that's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then like you say, the behaviors or the actions that come out of that obviously have
Yeah.
impacts and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, but not just on ourselves, but on those around us as well. So, yeah.
Right. And then on a whole other level, because it impacts so many other people. And I think that's actually kind of um spiritually or psychologically difficult for people to accept, because if I accept that my thoughts and my feelings are actually a result of chemicals
Hmm.
in my brain, there's a little sense of, if not a big sense of lack of control over that, right? And that gets really, really scary. So I think it's really hard to jump into that area, but I mean, first of all, that's not necessarily the case. We can
Right.
have and
Yeah.
experience a lack of dopamine, or our brain can not be doing the right things with dopamine and serotonin, and we can still make choices within that. But we have to start with acknowledging that that's really the difference. Somebody who's suffering, we all go through suffering.
Yes.
Every human
Absolutely.
on the planet
Hmm.
goes through suffering. We go through loss, we go through painful times, we go through self-worth kinds of issues. That's part of the daily rub of life, I think. Um, but things like depression or bipolar or schizophrenia, those kinds of things, that is a completely different level that is happening really at an organic level. Now, there are some issues, loss is a good example. There are some issues that can create more long-term disorders, right?
Yes.
But in it, but in a nutshell, that is in fact what is happening. If we looked at the organ that we were treating, whether it be loss or a depressive, so there's a difference between like a depressive disorder and a depressive episode, right?
Hmm.
If I have an episode, then it's something, and actually even major depressive disorder, something like I was reading this the other day, something like 4 out of 5 experience some form of remission within the first year.
Hmm.
So the rates are actually pretty high, success rates, not gone,
No, 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 no,
still.
but in a different
Yeah,
space, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. At the very least, I can ask that person, in the past year, what describe to me a 2 week period of time where you've experienced some sort of peace, joy in your life, and they can do it.
Right. Yeah.
And in the midst of an episode or a depressive disorder, that's not something that person can access.
No, no, absolutely. It makes me think of a friend of mine who wasn't diagnosed with several things until much later in life, and
Yeah,
realizes that they developed their own coping mechanisms for a number of
100%.
those things.
Oh yeah,
Not that they dealt with it perfectly, obviously, but they developed these coping mechanisms. But yet now, with where they're at now, they wish they'd had some of the help they're now having, 20, 30 years ago, when
100%.
it was just like, well, I do this, and how do I deal with that, and that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, it's actually personally the same story with ADD. I am
Hmm.
extremely ADD. I had absolutely no idea until I diagnosed myself. Once I started, I was like, well, that's what's been going on with me for this long. Holy cow. And then I really started to understand my brain. And then I started to really understand what coping mechanisms I had developed over time. I mean, and kind of the frustrating thing about not knowing that early on is that some of those coping mechanisms were really good. They're awesome. I actually help. I teach people them all the time.
Yeah.
Some of them were really destructive, and either they didn't help at all or they hurt people around me
Hmm.
because I didn't understand my brain well enough to be able to explain what was going on, and so
Yeah.
I would sort of react. And that's, I think, what I mean by moralizing it, because the people on the other end of that becomes a part of Kim's personality, who I am. I'm short-tempered, or whatever. I talk without thinking, or those kinds of things, which I do, by the way, um, all the time.
All the time.
And instead of recognizing there are certain sensory things that are going to happen to me that I
Hmm.
have to be aware of and manage, because if I go over that threshold, uh, my functioning goes away.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. So if we're interacting ourselves and we're going through a time of, difficult time or loss, or those kind of traumas and that kind of thing, where is there a line when we can, is there a line, maybe there isn't, that either we can identify or somebody else identifies and says, this is more than just you're going through a tough time. This is more than just, you're still grieving this
Yeah.
loss or that kind of thing. And it's more than that. It needs some medical intervention, professional
Mhm.
therapy, whatever that might be, prayer, obviously, always.
Well, and I think honestly, those are the kinds of things I think, things like prayer and talking and sitting with people and getting that support. Those are always going to be wonderful, beautiful, helpful kinds of things. You
For,
know, yeah, that's a hard question to answer, because I think there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. And I think it's going to be deciding when it's more is
mm,
going to be probably a mutual decision between the person dealing with it, suffering, and you as the caregiver and what you see. The things that we look for when something is actually a diagnosis, and I get this question all the time, is I ask them, okay, is it interfering with your life?
Mm.
Is it causing damage?
Yeah.
If I look through my life and it's whatever it is not causing damage at work, I'm still able to, get the outcomes done that I'm expected to do at work. It's not impacting my family. I'm not getting in fights all the time with my spouse because I'm imploding and, or if, one of the things that I really love to do is I'm a musician. I love music. If all of a sudden I can no longer find pleasure and I can no longer engage in music,
Right.
that's interfering significantly with my life.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I think that would be a good thing for a person to explore with somebody they're trying to support is how much is this thing that you're dealing with interfering with your life? And if it's significant, then yeah, we probably need to throw everything that we can at it
Hmm.
to be able to get you through. And even if it's normal, if somebody experiences a big loss in their life,
Yeah.
grief, those kinds of things, financial loss, those are life-altering circumstances. And it's really normal to be going through those kinds of things that may not be organic in the brain.
Right.
But irrespective of whether it's organic in the brain or life-altering circumstances, it's if the level of suffering I have is now interfering with my ability to live my life in a way that protects my self-worth, my relationships with other people, my relationships with my faith, that's I think when we know that we've gone past suffering.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in that vein, I guess the question would be, which is a question that came up, um, it was unclear to this person asking the question the difference between supporting someone who's experiencing what we're talking about, that kind of depression, going over the line, that kind of thing, versus someone who's got bipolar or schizophrenia, these sort of these buzzwords or words that we hear, but a lot of us don't understand those words, or certainly have maybe the wrong idea of what some of these are because they some become just a label or a buzzword or
Yeah.
something we've seen in a movie, but they're very real, obviously, and so
Very.
people were asking about the distinctions, I guess, and
I
how.
love it. And I think I was thinking about that question too, like how is the best way to answer it? And I think the best way to answer that is if we take like bipolar as an example,
Mhm.
the thing that I noticed the most, what you were mentioning, is that people get really confused about what it is. And when you see this stuff, you'll see schizophrenia or schizoaffective, or you'll see bipolar, and you won't necessarily know that it fits that whatever behavior you're seeing, because again, we see a behavior.
Yes.
It's sort of the difference. Like we're not going into a doctor and saying, here's the rash, look at my rash, right? We're going into a doctor and saying, well, I'm like, I'm super grandiose about things and I think I'm the best person on the planet and everybody else is really dumb around me. That's the rash, but we have a really hard time looking at it that way. And so what I notice in a lot of people, therapists included, is that we have a tendency to moralize it and then have an emotional reaction to it.
Mm.
So I'm not saying to not have those reactions. You're going to. What I'm saying is pay attention to them. So if you find yourself all of a sudden in a situation with somebody where they're making you angry a lot, right? Or they're doing things that are really socially inappropriate or awkward, those kinds of things. Those are keys. It's the rash. You're looking at a rash. Those are little keys for you that this may be a part of what they're dealing with, whatever mental health condition they're dealing with. And so those are the things that you might be able to either point out, hey, I noticed this and this and this, you would like all of a sudden you haven't done this before, and now all of a sudden you're sort of locking somebody into a conversation in a really public place about something that's really private and it's really loud. What's that about? Because you haven't done that before, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so if you can, how do I articulate that? Not put a value on it. Does that make sense? Just point it out like this is the behavior that I'm seeing. And I think the biggest I think the biggest, most powerful thing that we can do is just not judge it.
Mm.
See it as the symptom, see it as the rash, set the boundaries around it. I'm not okay with that. We can meet at this time. Please don't call me on that day, or just if you do call me on that day, know that I'm not going to respond to you until here and here and here. If you do need more help on those days, maybe it's time we get somebody else involved. Like
Mm.
set it, because when you're dealing with some of those other disorders, whether it be bipolar or personality disorder of some kind, those you are going to get some of those behavior that bump up against your own sense of social appropriateness, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term. So you're going to, I think people find themselves getting frustrated or getting angry, and that's the part that's really not helpful and gets in the way, I think, of people being able to just listen and empathize and and not forget that those boundaries, we we always think that they're mean for some reason instead of recognizing that they are the kindest thing that I can do. If I the analogy that I use, I when I was very first starting out in this field, I was working with developmental disabilities, and years ago I was sitting at a movie theater and somebody with Down syndrome came up and wanted my popcorn.
Mm.
And my answer to her was, "Nope, this is my popcorn. You need to eat your popcorn." You could look at that situation and think that it's mean, or you can look at that situation and recognize that part of what you're doing is kindly teaching
Mhm.
that person how to have social, really good, healthy social interactions with the world around them. And that's what we're doing with all of those boundaries. But we can only do that, I think, in a kind way. I
Yeah.
think we can only do that if we're not moralizing it.
Mm. Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the phrase that keeps coming up in recent conversations when we're talking about these things is that, the realization that, we don't all have a defined mental health condition, but we all need to condition our mental health. Right? So
100%.
when we're interacting with somebody else, to be able to look at that person, A, as a potential child, a child of God, right? And made in
Mhm.
his image and that kind of thing. And yes, the behavior might not be acceptable or understandable or all those kind of things, but just and taking a step back and go, well, I'm not perfect either, right? So
In
I
the
got
slightest.
I got my stuff going on. So, to interact kindly, but yeah, boundaries, very relevant in my own life because I tend to not have them where I should do. But again, they're
You met.
meant to be there to be kind and supportive and that kind of thing. And I guess the other thing is, and this would be outside of our remit, but I think a number of people have talked to me and they just don't understand those terms. So sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not, and sometimes to just love a person for who they are is important, I guess, at least from
I
a
think it is too. I think
non-clinical type person.
no, and even in clinical, there's a very famous psychologist. His name was Carl Rogers, and
Mm.
his entire theory about counseling was meeting a person where they're at, and the term was unconditional positive regard.
Mm.
That
Yes.
all a person needed, and he genuinely believed this, and I think he was just personally gifted at this, honestly. But
Sure.
that if no matter who was coming in and what condition that they had, that if they were met with unconditional positive regard, they would heal on their own. And he genuinely believed that. And I mean, I personally have seen the power in a lot of that work. I think where people get stuck, and myself included, is when they see something that genuinely needs correction.
Hmm.
And then what do I do? And that's where I think the boundaries are really helpful if you can do those boundaries without being angry about it.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
So next question that came up was, how does someone get over feelings of guilt? Now, again, not knowing the context of this question, my mind goes in several different
Yes.
avenues. Is that guilt in the sense of not helping somebody or not feeling able to help somebody? Is that feelings of guilt because of my condition has caused hurt to somebody else or that kind of thing? So it's kind of wide ranging, but yeah,
It is, but it's one I get all the time. And I guess the good news is it's gotten me to a place where I'm very practiced at answering it.
good. I
That's all.
will sit back
Oh,
and
yeah.
listen with positive regard.
I'm like, all right, here we go. Here's what I have found. Most folks, when they come in and they're talking about guilt,
Hmm.
what I realize is that they're conflating guilt with shame
Ah, okay. Yeah.
most often than not. So if I were to ask you, like, what's your idea? Like, what is your idea of guilt?
Well,
No, I know I put you on the spot. I shouldn't have
put
done
me
that.
on the spot. Well, I mean, I go to the
I
obvious,
didn't even prepare for
more
that.
kind of, definition where I've got guilt because I'm guilty of something, but then
Bingo.
there's also guilt in the sense of I feel guilty about something because I haven't done something,
Yeah.
So those
Keyword done.
feelings, yeah,
Yeah.
thing
Keyword
I've
is
done or
done.
haven't
Something I've
done,
done or something I have not done.
yeah, or should, well, yeah, we
Yeah.
should, but
If you were to describe shame, though, what would you describe? Usually for people, it's different somehow.
hmm, yeah, that's a really good question. When I haven't thought about as much as I could have.
Mm. I mean, honestly, nobody really, I mean,
It's
because
it's
we throw
it's
these words
similar,
around.
similar in the sense,
Yeah.
shame.
It feels similar, but most people, when they describe shame, they
Mhm.
describe something that feels much more pervasive, much deeper.
Okay.
And the way that when you hear people and you start pulling this out of people, when they're describing guilt, they're describing exactly how you just described it as something I have done or something that I did not do. It's an action, it's a behavior. When people describe shame, it's who I am.
Oh, okay.
It is, I don't know, I didn't go for my run this morning. I'm lazy.
Right.
Oh, no, no. So the guilt is I didn't go for my run. I didn't do this thing that I
Mm.
set a goal around and I really want to do it. Okay. The shame is I'm lazy and I can't finish anything in my life.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Shame has no healthy function in our lives. Guilt does, by the way. I'm
Mm.
like, usually what I tell people is, congratulations, you're not a sociopath.
Winner.
Win, win, win. Like it doesn't feel good,
No.
but typically when we feel guilt about something, it's it's this little voice inside of us that is keeping us on the balance beam,
Hmm.
right? It's saying like, nope, that's outside of your character, outside of your value system. That's not who you are. You are a person that believes in health, Kim. You're a person that wants to take care of yourself. When you don't go do those things, you're going to feel guilty because that's outside your value system,
Hmm.
right? If I lie to someone, I'm going to feel guilty about that because that's not really inside my value system
Yeah.
to a degree. And it depends on the lie, honestly, my personal value system. But that's guilt is a really normally has a really healthy function in life. When we take it to the therefore I am,
Mm.
that's the part that where the work comes in, where we have to start challenging that, where we have to start pulling that apart, helping ourselves. And some of it is just helping people recognize the difference between guilt. What did you do or not do?
Mm.
Okay. What would you like to do differently versus who I am? And then challenge. I mean, let's take I'm lazy. So I didn't go to the gym this morning, so I'm lazy. Okay. Part of the way that I challenge that is look at, take a 10,000-foot view, take a step back, look at my entire life. Am I in fact lazy?
Right.
Not, I mean, no, I went to freaking grad school. Evidence number one, like lazy people don't tend to do that. I'm running my own business. Like that doesn't, no, that doesn't, right? I mean, I'm a gardener. I love to garden. I look at my yard. I'm like, well, no, that's not a lazy person. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Usually when you hold shame under a microscope, it doesn't hold water. So it's a little easier to challenge that way. So I think that's an important distinction because then if you're just focused on guilt and my mental health condition, I've hurt a lot of people. Okay. So then how do we repair that? How do we then go about within my own value system saying, I'm sorry for what this has done to
Hmm.
the people around me without going to the shame place?
Right.
While not letting go of acknowledging that this is something that you're suffering from as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're not identifying yourself as that piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
the other thing that shame does is it keeps us stuck. If I am in fact, a lazy person, what's the likelihood I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow?
Mm, not high.
Not high. If I made a choice today to not go to the gym,
Right.
all it is, it's a choice. I just
Right.
didn't go to
Yeah.
the gym today. It makes it a lot easier to make a choice to go to the gym tomorrow. Does
Right.
that make sense? If I recognize that my ADD has caused some damage, like I have hurt some people in my life because my sensory system goes nuts and then I bark at them like they
Mm.
all of a sudden, I don't know, what's that book? Who Stole My Cheese? I
I
love
don't
that
know.
book.
I'll have to look that one up.
It's awesome. Who Stole My Cheese? It's a great book. But I bark at them and I'm super mean to them. Then maybe part of my guilt is saying, hey, Kim, this is outside your value system. You don't like to treat people that way. So then I can go back and say, hey, I'm really sorry for how I did that. This is what's going on for me. I'm going to do better on trying to recognize when my sensory system is overloaded so that I don't do that kind of stuff. But just so you know, I never meant to do that. And I know that was really painful for you.
Yeah.
In the same way we deal with every other kind of guilt,
Yeah.
healthy, good guilt.
Right. So part of getting over the guilt is actually learning the lesson from it. And, like you say, if it has affected somebody else, have a conversation with that person,
Yes.
as long as you still can. I have
Well, as long as
something
you still
with
can,
my father who I can't, I'm through it.
100%.
I can't go and actually have that conversation with him this side of heaven. So,
Yep.
and by the time
You
I
know,
get,
in
but
AA and NA, step four, I don't know how many people know about NA and AA, but a phenomenal program. But step four is making reparations,
mm,
making those amends,
yeah,
except for when making those amends could be more harmful to the other person, or I can't.
yes,
Those are harder. And I think for people of faith,
mm,
that step gets a little, actually a lot easier because that's where I think like faith and prayer
yeah,
and things like that come into place. So does things like volunteer work and um, finding people find a lot of ways to make reparations for something that they regret in their lives that isn't necessarily directly to a person,
no.
but does help them start to heal.
Right. It can be to
Mhm.
a circumstance or a situation or something along. Yeah. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
see that actually, and can be a positive motivator sometimes too, perhaps, or at least can be lived out in a more positive way. I mean, I've known many people that have gone through all sorts of things in their lives, and they would, when they're functioning, 20 years down the road, sometimes it's like, well, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be doing this, sort of thing. But at the
100%.
time,
Yep. It
yeah,
takes some
pretty tough.
time and I think it takes some really healthy acknowledging of what a person what that person has been through
Yeah.
and the damage, if there's been damage, then to face that in some way. Because
Yeah.
as difficult as that is, I've never seen somebody get back in the driver's seat of their life
Mm.
without facing that first.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's a topic that's been coming up a lot recently. And fortunately, we have recently connected with a new group that's dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that. And you may hear more about that in the future. I'm just a little, tidbit. But the question here is, how can we best serve those caregiving someone with or without dementia? So
Yeah.
that piece of the puzzle, because that person, in some respects, is not the same person that you knew pre-dementia, right? Their personality can change, and then it can, this is just my experience. Sometimes they're back, they're the person
Back.
you knew, and then you have a moment of clarity, and then they're gone again. And so that can be really confusing. And I hopefully didn't,
Yep.
sub that question, but I can totally, that's kind of where I intersect with that a lot in my work, both in the church and in hospice land. When people start grieving and all sorts of pieces of the puzzle. But how do we help somebody in that situation?
Oh, and it is important. It's such a weird grief too, because of what you're talking about. It's such a roller coaster. Sometimes the person's there and then they're gone, and there's no way to know when they're coming back, if they're coming back, those kinds of things. And it's just, and it's just a weird position also to be in, to grieve somebody who physically is still there,
Right.
but they're not. they're not there. And I'm glad that you guys are connecting with some more people. I think we're seeing in the field an explosion of this. A lot of this is just generationally, those baby boomers and
Mm,
kind of where they've gotten to. So we have a much larger population of people who are in one of two places. They're either starting to experience dementia or Alzheimer's themselves, or they are finding themselves in a position to caregive somebody with Alzheimer's. And the question is really about supporting those folks in caregiving roles. I
mhm.
think it's vital. It's so important. And I saw this in a number of the questions too that weren't necessarily questions, but they were phenomenal ideas. And they were people clearly who had been through something, I'm guessing something pretty similar, because what they were saying is, hey, we really can't ask these people what it is that they need because they don't know. They don't.
No.
One of the things that happens to people who are going through depression, grief, loss, those kinds of things is a level of dementia themselves, honestly. Memory starts to lapse. Decision fatigue is extremely high. They're literally making so many choices. I mean, all of a sudden in their lives, they're making choices and decisions for two people. And
Mm.
they never had to do that before, not to the degree that they are now. And so the level of exhaustion is incredibly high. So the best thing we can do is come up with whatever it is that you're going to do. Hey, I'm going to bring you guys meals for a week. Hey, I'm going to come over on Thursday. I'm going to call you beforehand, make sure it's a good time.
Mm.
Hey, I'm going to offer my driving, tell me how many appointments you have this week. Okay, I'll take them to that one, and that one,
Yeah.
right? To say this is what I'm going to do instead of just let me know when you need me.
Right. Let somebody know what you're offering, right? This is
Yes.
what I can help with. What are your needs? And I
Yes.
can I can help with this one, and this one, so that that's taken off your plate,
So
right?
that's taken off your plate.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
right. One of the biggest things, honestly, is respite care. And
Mm,
unfortunately, I think Oregon does a lot better than Idaho does in terms of having those services through facilities and through insurance and programs a little bit more accessible. Idaho has very little, but even with those services, there's usually very little opportunity for respite services. What I mean by respite is somebody to come in
okay.
and give them a break.
Yeah.
Literally, just go for a walk. Go to the grocery store by yourself.
Yes.
Holy cow. I mean, if you can imagine just a task as simple as going to the grocery store and how much organization it takes to be able to plan for, okay, that person's going to come with me, but they're going to get confused and then they're probably going to have a meltdown. Or if I'm not going to do those things, then how am I going to plan for where they're going to be and what they're going to do and how I'm going to get out? And those are the things that they really need people, almost a phone tree kind of a thing, right? And people actively saying, how many times do you need to go to the grocery store? Can I run to the grocery store for you? Or better yet, let me come over and sit and hang out and get to know so that you can go to the grocery store because they need those breaks.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Even if it's just those few minutes, they can step out of the caregiver role just for a little while. I see respite is slightly different, but in hospice, although not always. But sometimes it's allowing the husband, the wife, the child to be the husband, wife, or child for a moment and not the full-time caregiver, even if that's, half an hour, or a day, or whatever that might look like. Yeah, so that's huge. And as you say, I really picked up on that. Suddenly they got decisions to make for two people, right? Because when
Oh, yeah.
somebody's at the point where they cannot make their own decisions, you have to be the decision maker, and you want the best for that person, but it's also like, well, what would they want as opposed to what I think is best for them?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, huge.
Yep. Well, and then add on top the layer of confusion that the person with dementia has. And so oftentimes the caregiver now, not only am I making a decision for two people, but the decision that I'm making for you is confusing to you. You don't understand. And so now you're fighting me on it.
Right.
And so there's a whole other level of speaking of guilt. And one of the things that we did not talk about with guilt and shame that I want to kind of go back to is there is such a thing as toxic guilt
Okay.
that happens for people. It's very common with people who grow up in families of addictions or families like somebody with a personality disorder, where things get twisted. All of a sudden, let's say dad is sick, but nobody is willing to address dad's sickness, and so everything is everybody else's fault,
Mm,
right? Dad yelled and hit you because you were too loud. Those kinds of things. When you grow up with those kinds of messages, you start to get a twisted idea of what guilt is.
mm,
Something similar happens people caring for people with dementia because I'm shifting roles.
yes.
So all of a sudden, I have been a spouse and a partner with you for so long, and now I'm a parent.
Mm.
And that is, we're not, no, it's like these are the things that they don't write down in books. Thankfully, they do now.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
There
yeah.
are a lot of books. Not
Sure.
that anybody going through that situation has the energy to read them, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. By the time you get to that point, the thought of reading a book, but someone handed me a magazine actually recently, and I thought that's probably more helpful because it's more digestible, right? Rather
Tiny.
than a big thick book. I guess we live in the world of blog posts these days, right? Somebody can take 5 minutes to read a blog post on something that distills three chapters of a book into something digestible. And I'm not saying anything against the book, but I think this is why it's so important. Again, condition our mental health, right? Be doing this
Uh-huh.
research so that hopefully you're never in that situation, but if you are, or someone who is, you've
Yes.
done the ground. Also, another plug, Stephen Ministry training when it comes around next time, because we deal with some of those issues and then continue to do so in continuing education again, so you can be um, not a know-it-all, but you can know some of the stuff that
You
maybe you
can know.
to distill. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I swear, one of these days I know somebody is gonna just create a business that is counseling through memes. It's just gonna be, I feel like for most people, like that's all I can take right now. Just give me the memes. Give me the short button. Anyway,
Hey, there's a
it's true.
niche in the market. Maybe that's the next one, right?
Yes, exactly.
And if they can be Star Wars related, even better. Okay, before I completely squirrel, this
There
is
is no
vague.
try. There is
No,
only do.
that's right. This is vaguely related to that in some respect, I think. How much is enough? Address malingering. Hmm.
Yes.
This
Okay.
is a tough one.
For those of you who don't know the term, like, oh, that's a former physician or something that asks that. I love it. It's a great question. And the short answer is you don't.
Okay.
Because so first of all, it's malingering is not a diagnosis. It's not a diagnosable mental health condition.
Hmm.
It's a behavior pattern.
Yeah.
It's something that people do. It's actually fairly common. It's what people may start to do that. What it is it's feigning or exaggerating or lying about symptoms, mental health or physical health, those kinds of things,
Mm.
usually for some sort of secondary gain. So,
Right.
to get out of military or to get out of, you see it a lot in crimes, right? Trying to get out of being convicted of a specific crime, those kinds of things. But it's usually to avoid something like that. Believe it or not, even for a medical professional, it's very difficult to diagnose and takes a long time
Mm.
because what we never want to do is call something malingering too quickly and then have missed a
Yeah.
pretty big thing that's been going on, right? This is huge with things like autoimmune diseases. And when you pull in the ACEs studies, Richard, and you guys start to look at adverse childhood experiences, we know from a data perspective, we know that those people who have experienced ACEs are going to have more things like autoimmune diseases and primary health conditions. They are going to experience more severe allergies to mold, or
Mhm.
they're going to have a meltdown because they have to buy a new mattress and they're worried about the new chemicals and plastics in the mattress because their bodies actually don't have those same immune systems. So
Mm.
again, back to like Dr. Amon's, the we're the only field that doesn't look at the organ it's treating. Like the better we get at seeing this stuff, we're gonna start we're gonna start seeing more and more of it. But it's really we have to be very, very careful. I think it's better to assume, even if we think something's malingering, it's better to assume that they aren't and that it's very real than it is to assume that they're malingering and
Mm.
miss something,
Right, right.
right? And yeah,
Yeah. I mean, when I think of malingering as well, I mean, I wonder, and maybe I'm off beam, but even if it is malingering, the question in my mind is why are they doing that?
why?
You
Yes.
know, even if it's like you say, for some secondary yeah thing like
What's the
getting
secondary
out
gain?
and so, but why is that? You know, what has got them to that point? And some people it's just a way of life and it's what they've learned and that's a coping
Yeah.
mechanism, whatever. Some people just do it. But yeah, I always like to ask the question, why is that happening? I'm kind of like a kid, you know,
I
why?
am too.
Why?
I am the exact same way. And I think the benefit to asking yourself why is if you can find that out, this is what they're, at least this is what I do, but it's also um, it's how I function as a therapist. As a therapist, I'm what you call a relational cultural therapist. So I look at people and behavior and how it fits within the system they are coming from. Does
Mm,
that make sense? So if I have somebody who comes in and is lying a lot, the
yeah,
question that I have to ask myself is, what is that getting them out there that they don't know how to get any other way?
right,
And it helps me not judge it. And then it helps me address the lying in a way that is, I mean, I can understand, let's take war as an example. I can understand feigning an illness in order to stay out of something that might cost me my life or put me in a position to have to take somebody else's.
right.
That's a that's a very real. I think if we look at it from that perspective, again, I think it just most important thing we can do, Carl Rogers, unconditional positive regard. How can we just meet people where they're at and and just understand where that behavior is coming from and what they're after?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
way that doctors go about it is that they run and how we go about it is we run a battery of tests.
sure.
And then if the tests don't show the same as what the person is reporting at all,
Hmm.
then we even go a step further if we can, and we start talking to family, friends, coworkers, those kinds of things, getting a context and try to see if anything matches up. And only at the point where nothing matches up, the whole battery of tests, the physicals, psychological tests, and their context doesn't fit this, only then do we start looking at, okay, I'm fairly certain this is malingering. So then how, then I start, then I, as a therapist, then I start looking at how can I help that person meet this need over here
Hmm.
by doing this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. But again, that's one of those situations. When do I refer? Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
which interestingly comes into kind of our last question for this
yeah.
episode, when it talks about referrals and that kind of thing, and certainly again, you know, plug for Stephen Ministry, and we may use some of these materials outside of training Stephen ministers because we've got permission for that. But it does talk about, you know, when is the moment to make a mental health referral? When is the moment to say to somebody, you know, not in a clinical way because that's not our job, but you know would medication help this?
Yeah.
Would professional therapy help what you're going through? You know, perhaps there's some diagnosable
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle here. And I guess so. The question is how can we encourage someone in that situation? You know, to say, hey, this is
This might
something
be bigger.
bigger than what we've been talking about,
Mm.
and then, of course, finding someone we can refer to because that is getting harder and harder because there's
Yeah, exactly.
more. Well, going back to an earlier point, which I hadn't thought of, we're hitting more and more people on the planet, right? So there's more and more people that are going to have issues
Yep.
and concerns and that kind of thing. And it's becoming, you know, more problematic in the sense of just volume in some respects. And therefore, there aren't as many therapists and doctors and professionals to go around. And again, we can help only with what we can help with. We don't want to hinder, we want to, or don't want to hurt, we want to help.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think the answer to that question is some of the things that we've talked about in the last episode, but also this one. Um, when you're seeing somebody where you're noticing whatever it is that they're dealing with, the level of suffering is impacting multiple life domains, right? This is really interfering with so many aspects of your life, and you're seeing some of that damage. That might be a good time to say, I think maybe there's something bigger here. Let's talk to the doctor. Let's talk to a therapist and just rule it out.
Hmm.
What's the harm in ruling it out? Like if you go into a counselor or a psychologist or whoever and say, I've been dealing with this. I need to see if is this, pretty normal and I can do this with a normal kind of just support that I have, or do you think that there's something bigger? They're going to answer that,
Yeah.
hopefully
Totally.
accurately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
One of the things that I will not do is give anybody a diagnosis of depression and treat depression if they haven't first seen their primary care doctor and had panels done. For men and women, I want to see how the hormones have come through. I don't want to see it. I want your doctor to see it,
Yeah. 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 For sure.
right? And I want
Yeah.
your doctor to look at your thyroid, and I want all of those kinds of things because there's some things from a primary health standpoint that look just like a mental health condition, and I'm barking up the wrong tree. We're both barking up the wrong tree. So you can certainly do that just about at any time. Let's just make sure that's not going on.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
like, no, you're going through some tough stuff, and we just need to see if this is a level of suffering that needs more support.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's what I look for is the person getting stuck for a really long time. If
Mm.
somebody has experienced grief or loss, I'm not sure I would even ask that question before a year. Like,
Mm.
I mean, unless I'm seeing significant um, impairment in their ability to function. Like I can no longer go to work. I can't get up in the morning and get my kids off to school.
Yeah.
Um,
Red
okay. Those are
flag.
red flags,
Red flag.
right? Those are really big. I am thinking pretty actively about suicide most of the time. Red flag.
Yes. And one never to be ignored, for sure.
Never to be ignored.
No.
Never to be ignored, and certainly never to sort of fold into that malingering box.
Mm.
Because again, maybe, but if you're wrong, oh, we
No.
don't want to be on the other side of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something that strikes me, and I'm, coming from Britain, I use my cultural reference.
Yeah.
Um, I only ever went to my doctor if there was something wrong,
Yeah. Well, it's
right?
very American as well.
Yeah, it's very true across the board. But just having your annual physical, right? Just so
Yeah.
you can check those basic things that are going on or not going on, especially as we get older and that kind of thing. And hopefully, not everybody has this, but hopefully the majority of people have some sort of relationship with their primary care, right? So that they're just not, rubber stamping and having the blood test, but maybe they can talk to that person and that kind of thing as well. So I think just being able to check in at least once
Yeah.
a year. And I know that that isn't always the easiest with systems. And
Yeah.
I come from the land of the NHS, and yes, there are lots of things a lot of people say negative things, but I would say a lot of positive things as
Me
well.
too. Yep.
But yeah, just that checkup. And as you say, I think that that's really huge wisdom that I'm hearing is like, it's not just a matter of you're this, you're that, you're the other. Let's check all of those things that work together, right?
So many work together. And I think the other thing that to just keep in mind for everybody to really know is you can talk to your primary care physician about your mental health.
Yes.
They want you to. And I think that's something a support person can do as well. So many times we go into our doctor and our doctor's like, how have you been feeling lately? And really the question we ask is not, or answer is not how you've been feeling lately. It's how do I feel right now? I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I'm fine. But
Right.
I've forgotten that I haven't slept in 3 days and I'm exhausted and I've been getting in fights every day with my spouse and I forget. So if you as a support person can say, okay, let's maybe write down the four things that we talked about today that you're really struggling with so that you have something when you go into your doctor, you have something to refer back to and go, oh, right, I was supposed to talk to you about this, this, and this. Because that's the other thing that a doctor can do. They can be a second, what's the word? A second sort of fail safe for you, right? As a support person, you can say, let's make sure, have you talked to your doctor? Have you gone in for your annual checkup? Let's talk to your doctor about these things. And your doctor can also be a person saying, asking the question in their head, is this impacting their life more than it should?
Right.
Good, right? So then you've got two people looking at it. But I think where that fail-safe falls apart is when people forget that they can talk and need to talk to their
Yeah,
primary care doc about their mental health too.
that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there we go. Well, good.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I love that you guys are doing this again, and the questions, keep them coming because the questions they're great questions. You're asking all of the right questions. It just tells me you guys are on the right, you're on the right path.
Yeah. Guys, as you're listening to this and you've listened to the other episodes before and possibly even after this one, again, we'll have, an email address. You can email us, let us know if you've got additional questions, and
Mhm.
we'll get back and do some more. And hopefully we're going to be just going where the Lord is leading us in just coming alongside each other and being open and honest and sharing and talking. And that's a big thing too, just being able to talk to one another and be open and honest and obviously praying and trusting the Lord. But, He's given us a lot of tools and we need to use all of them. So I'm just really grateful, Kim, for your time and look forward
But
to our next episode
me
and the
too.
work that we're doing as the Lord leads. So,
That sounds great. We'll
guys, check out the other episodes.
I'll see you next time.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.